kind invitation and for accommodating my remote participation from Washington, D.C. Congratulations to Strat-based ADR Institute for convening such a timely and substantive event. I am pleased to open this special roundtable for fellow ambassadors, which will contemplate the stakes involved when we discuss the current situation in the South China Sea. It is fitting that we fellow diplomats for this panel, as it is our job to advocate for a respective country's interest, or for our respective interests. As it happens, all our interests should converge and align when it comes to maintaining the South China Sea as a sea of peace and stability. By now, we have all memorized the arguments for keeping the peace in the South China Sea, its vital role in the international trade, as well as the biodiversity and wealth of resources these waters hold. There are things all of us value, and as responsible members of the international community, we must make sure the rule of law is upheld so that we all get our fair due from this vital waterway. Thus, when a claim to the South China Sea is not only without legal basis, but so expansive as to be prejudicial to others, we must speak up collectively, and more so if the claim is backed by illegal, aggressive, coercive, and aggressive actions. The rules-based international order itself is at stake if we remain silent and do nothing. The Philippines is on the front line of efforts to defend this rules-based international order. Our position is firmly anchored on the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, and the binding 2016 Arbitral Award on the South China Sea. Our approaches in this defense are several and in parallel. First, through preventive diplomacy and dialogue. We remain proactive with our engagements with China and continue to keep channels open, sustain dialogue at various levels, and seek an atmosphere conducive to sincere and meaningful discussion. It is in this spirit that the understanding between the Philippines and China on the principles and approaches for the conduct of rotation and resupply, or raw emissions in the Ayungin Shoal, was reached. The understanding was concluded in good faith with the explicit agreement that it would not prejudice national positions. Second, through regional engagement with the ASEAN, we maintain regional engagement with the ASEAN and remain engaged with them, strengthening the partnerships with the other claimant states in the context of the Code of Conduct, or the COC negotiations, and through bilateral engagements. We are committed to the process of concluding a substantive and effective COC. More generally, we continue to advocate for ASEAN centrality in the evolving regional architecture and call for arrangements such as the UNCOS or the AUKUS to complement the centrality. Third, through alliances and partnerships with like-minded partners, we recognize the importance of upholding multilateralism by reinforcing partnerships across the globe, by strengthening ties with like-minded nations and regional organizations. We amplify our call for adherence to the international law and to the international rules-based order and countering unilateral actions that undermine such legal norms. Fourth, through maritime dialogues and cooperation, we continue to expand our political consultations mechanisms with countries where we have diplomatic relations, with maritime cooperation as well as the situation in the South China Sea as staple agenda items. Fifth, through advancing UNCLOS and the rule of law in global ocean management, we seek to broaden the acknowledgement of the Arbitral Award in the Philippines' position by advancing the rule of law and underscoring the primacy of UNCLOS as the comprehensive legal framework for law and order in the seas and the management of issues and challenges in the oceans. Finally, through the public diplomacy and awareness efforts, we pursue broad diplomacy and awareness efforts, mindful that domestic support is the fuel that propels our actions forward. Domestically, we recognize the need to strengthen and upgrade our defense capabilities. Our military modernization program is in full swing, aided by partners such as the United States. At the same time, noting the inextricable link between security and prosperity, we are implementing a whole-of-government approach to accelerate our economic growth as a complement for our national security efforts. I would like to end on a brief note about the Philippine-United States alliance. Our countries continue to strengthen and enhance not only our bilateral defense cooperation, but our economic ties as well. cognizant that an economically secure and prosperous Philippines will be an even better ally and a partner for the United States. Our friendship and partnership will remain a tool for peace, stability, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region. With that, I would like to formally open this panel discussion, and I look forward to a productive exchange of views among our many Manila-based counterparts. Thank you.
There you have it. You just heard from the Ambassador of the Republic of the Philippines to the United States of America, His Excellency Jose Manuel G. Romualdez. And now allow me to introduce our panel chair for this panel, the President of the Strat-based ADR Institute, Professor Dindo Manhit. Let's give him a round of applause.
Good morning to everyone. Welcome to our panel on peace and stability in the South China Sea, given the stakes of the international community. Allow me to introduce members of our panel. Of course, we thank our dear Ambassador Romualdez for joining us with a keynote speech. He has been actively involved in advocating South China Sea, West Philippine Sea issue and the importance of a rules-based international order. But for our panel, I'd like to introduce beside me is Ambassador Endo Kazuya. As he has emphasized Japan's strong support for upholding the rules-based international order, particularly in the maritime domain. Another one is our ambassador from Australia, Ambassador Hai Kyung Yu, or we know him as Ambassador HK. Thank you for joining us, Ambassador HK. Ambassador HK has been a strong advocate for upholding rules-based international order, particularly in the context of the West Philippine Sea. She continued to emphasize Australia's commitment to the principle of freedom of navigation and overflight and its support for our 2016 Arbitral Award. Our next ambassador is Ambassador Mary Kay Carlson for the United States, who has been vocal in her support for the Philippines in upholding a rules-based international order. And Ambassador David Hartman of Canada, thank you, Ambassador, who has expressed strong support for a rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific, particularly in the context of the West Philippine Sea. We continue to thank him for the dark vessel detection system. And also, of course, our ambassador from Germany, Ambassador Andreas Paffertnowski. Thank you, Ambassador, for joining us, who has been an advocate for respecting international law, especially the UNCLOS. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. Allow me to start with a question for everyone. Given the maritime and economic security in the South China Sea, is intricately tied to the security and economic prosperity of the Indo-Pacific, and given the increasingly aggressive behavior of China, how can like-minded states ensure that the rule of law is safeguarded? So, any ambassadors would like to share their thoughts? Or should I? Master HK, I think you were ready to. Master HK?
Very happy to go first. Thank you all for being at this really important dialogue, and Australia certainly will be supporting the Philippines to ensure that the Manila dialogue becomes a forum that's very important for the region to ensure that we achieve a stable, peaceful and prosperous region for all. Coming back to your question, Dindo, I mean, that's really easy for Australia. The rules-based order is important to Australia because as a middle power country, we need a region that is actually governed by well-established norms and rules, where countries can exercise their agency and determine its future, right, in itself. And of course, the South China Sea for Australia is an important international waterway for trade. For Australia, every year, 1.2, actually every day, what am I talking about? Every day, $1.2 billion worth of seaborne trade moves in and out of Australian seaports. And 44% of our seaborne exports and 27% of our seaborne imports go through the South China Sea. So it goes to show why the West Philippine Sea is so important. And finally, of course, we live here. Australia is in the region. So for us, the West Philippine Sea is in our backyard. So to that extent, what can we do to further advance the rules-based order and the rule of law? Well, for Australia, we have been working closely with all countries, very openly and in a transparent way, to ensure that we set the right conditions or keep the right conditions for peace, right? And to ensure that we can contribute to the collective deterrence of aggressive behavior and coercion. And I think that's what's really important. And in practice for Australia, what that means is you speak up and you call out when there's been encroachment and against sovereignty and there's violation of international law. And this is why Australia has repeatedly, publicly expressed our concerns about China's aggressive and dangerous conduct, repeated conduct in the West Philippine Sea, including against Philippine vessels and at, Second Thomas Shoal, Sabina Shoal. I know all of you know all about this. But in addition, when it comes to deterrence, there are many ways we can work together to achieve that. And this is why, in Australia's case, we have certainly worked with the Philippines to first get the Philippines' understanding of international law, including UNCLOS, further deepened so that the application of that law is clear. And this is why we have been running international law courses, UNCLOS courses, where we have already trained more than 600 staff across 28 agencies in the Philippines. We are also working closely together with the Philippines to ensure our defense cooperation is really stepped up. And you will notice that the types of exercises we're getting involved in are becoming more complex and deeper, like exercise Pitch Black, like exercise Alon. So these are other ways we are actually doing what we can to further advance the rule of law. And finally, ensuring that we can actually help the Philippines have the capabilities they need through providing equipment, working on vessel sustainment. These are really practical steps in which we can actually help with that. And coupled with that is the economic piece. I said finally, but this is really the final piece. And I think the economic engagement to increase trade and investment between our countries is another very important way that we can actually advance the rule of law.
Thank you, Ambassador HK. Maybe I can connect it to my question. Maybe I can ask also for remarks, maybe some opening remarks for everyone. But I think Ambassador HK did her opening remarks already. I can start with Ambassador Endo.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I would also like to first congratulate the holding of this first ever Manila dialogue on the South China Sea. And I understand that this session is entitled a Diplomatic Roundtable, but being diplomatic and being honest are not contradictory, I believe. They are compatible, and I look forward to a candid exchange of views. And as everyone has been emphasizing, the issue concerning the South China Sea is directly related to the peace and stability of the region and is a legitimate concern of the international community, including Japan, without any doubt. For example, as HK just mentioned, but in our case, Japan heavily relies on maritime transport particularly for the import of resources and energy. And according to one statistics, 92% of crude oil and 50% of natural gas imported to Japan pass through the South China Sea. It is critical to ensure that this vital sea lane remains to hold freedom of navigation and maritime safety. And with regard to the importance of UNCLOS, the world's oceans are intricately connected, forming a vast shared network that links our countries and economies. And what happens in the maritime order of one ocean inevitably impacts others. This interconnectedness is precisely why the UNCLOS serves as our common ground. And let me just mention introduce our own circumstances in the East China Sea. Since 1970s, China has begun to assert its claim against Japan's sovereignty. In 1992, China enacted a domestic legislation asserting Senkaku Islands as well as Spratly Islands and others as its own territory. And the situation took a further turn in 2008 when we witnessed the first incursion of Chinese Coast Guard vessels into our territorial water. Since 2012, we observed the drastic escalation of China's rhetoric and actions, and the past 12 years have been marked by a steady increase of them, symbolically shown in the large number of Chinese Coast Guard vessels around Senkaku Islands. And we also face lots of other issues, from unilateral development of resources in the East China Sea to installation of buoys in Japan's EEZ. We are also faced with the challenges of expansion of military activities around our region. And let me also share some of the Japanese government's responses to the evolving security challenges around the region. Japan established the National Security Council in 2013 to ensure that diplomacy led by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the operations of the Ministry of Defense, Japan Self-Defense Forces, and those of Japan Coast Guard and others are conducted in a coordinated manner. Japan has also enhanced its law enforcement capabilities to adjust the presence of larger and more heavily armed vessels. Engagement plays a critical role while Japan has issued strong protests on individual incidents. We also attach great importance in maintaining direct exchange of views with China. To maintain and strengthen peace and stability in the region, Japan has also made significant strides in building cooperative relations with many ASEAN members. For many years, Japan has actively engaged in maintaining law enforcement capacity enhancement, not only with the Philippines, but also with Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, among others, across all spectrum that encompasses not only provisions of vessels, equipment, and trainings, but also diplomatic support. In our engagement with the Philippines, Japan has put emphasis on several impactful areas for cooperation and assistance. Aside from the provision of 12 patrol vessels to the Philippine Coast Guard through ODA, an additional 5 patrol vessels are to be provided. And the process of installing Japan's first coastal surveillance radar under the Official Security Assistance Scheme, in addition to the defense equipment transfer, is also underway. In July of this year, RIA, Reciprocal Access Agreement, was also signed to enhance our interoperability. Japan is also going to provide a satellite data communication system to strengthen maritime domain awareness capabilities in the South China Sea. The system will enable the transmission of images between vessels in the field and the headquarters of the Philippine Coast Guard, thereby contributing to a more rapid decision-making and response in the event of an incident. Japan, of course, appreciates the government of the Philippines for having consistently complied with the 2016 Arbitral Tribunal Award and for showing its commitment to the peaceful settlement of disputes in the South China Sea. And we are we remain committed to enhancing the law enforcement capabilities of the Philippines, and together we would like to work to uphold an international order based on the rule of law. But in today's complex and dynamic geopolitical landscape, it is imperative to work closely, not just between Japan and the Philippines, but also with broader allies and like-minded partners as we do today. And we look forward to working together to create a secure and prosperous future for the entire Indo-Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Kazu. Sir David?
Great. Thank you, Professor Manhit. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Ordonel, Excellencies, and esteemed colleagues, good morning, bonjour, magandang umaga sa inyo lahat. It is indeed my honor to be here this morning to talk about an issue that matters to us all. And indeed, today's discussion is both important and timely. The maritime domain underpins our shared prosperity, connectivity, and security. And yet, in recent years, we have unfortunately been witnessing, on a global scale, the active erosion of the rules-based maritime order. Increasing militarization of essential waterways, exaggerated maritime boundary claims, and the use of coercive actions to threaten and intimidate other states and/or their commercial fleets risks escalating disputes into dangerous conflicts. The growing use of dark or shadow vessels commandeered to be used for illicit activities such as illegal fishing, smuggling, and sanctions evasion allow for the secret movement of prohibited goods and complicate day-to-day maritime safety. These ships are not only a hazard to other vessels, but also to coastal communities who rely upon essential waterways for their access to food, fuel, and goods. Incidents involving official maritime infrastructure are also increasing in frequency and have the potential to negatively affect millions of people around the world. None of these challenges are restricted to a single region. They matter as much in the Northern Pacific as they do in the West Philippine and the South China Seas. Unfortunately, while some states are resorting to the use of force to press their claims, solutions require dialogue and collective action, not force, to maintain freedom of navigation in key regions like the South China Sea. Only by working jointly with our allies and partners for the common interest of maintaining freedom of navigation according to international law can we address these current challenges. Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy acknowledges that the South China Sea is one of the regions, and indeed one of the world's key security hotspots. 20% of global trade and 1/3 of global shipping flows through the South China Sea annually, making it one of the world's most strategically and economically vital waterways. The waters of the South China Sea also provide important fishing stock and resources, which are vital for regional food security and environmental resilience. The subsea oil and gas reserves found under the South China Sea are also a valuable source of energy to help meet the growing energy demands of the region. These aforementioned factors all mean that a crisis in this region would surely have global ramifications. That is why Canada is seriously concerned about China's increasingly coercive and destabilizing actions in the South China Sea. The recent escalation of intimidation tactics against several ASEAN partners in the South China Sea, including the Philippines and Vietnam, continues to raise serious concerns regarding respect for international law and the ability of states to exercise sovereign rights within their exclusive economic zones. These actions not only jeopardize safety, but also infringe upon the rights of all nations to operate peacefully in these waters. The implementation of international law, including UNCLOS, is essential to guide the peaceful resolution of contemporary maritime boundary disputes. It is for this reason that Canada works with partners in the region to support the rule of law, navigation and overflight rights, along with the effective management of maritime resources. Adherence to a common set of rules applicable to all countries, both big and small, is critical for our common security and prosperity and the safe management of our global commons. In this regard, we commend ASEAN's commitment to finalizing a code of conduct for the South China Sea at an early date and reiterate our support for a code of conduct that affirms the rights of all states to the lawful uses of the region's waterways. For Canada's part, we are committed to enhancing our presence in the region under the auspices of our Indo-Pacific strategy, supported by $2.3 billion in new investments to create more opportunities to work side by side with allies and partners to protect international law. Under Operation Horizon, the Canadian Armed Forces are playing a more active role in the region to help promote, with our allies and our partners, greater peace and stability. This includes participation in regional activities, exercises, and operations to demonstrate Canada's commitment to promoting the rule of law and the importance of the rules-based international system. For example, just a few short weeks ago, His Majesty's Canadian ship Vancouver participated in an exercise Sama-Sama and then conducted a routine transit through the Taiwan Strait with our U.S. allies. These activities promote peace, resilience, and security throughout the Indo-Pacific. In addition to a near-persistent presence of Royal Canadian Navy vessels in the region, our dark vessel detection program uses Canadian technology to support oceans management initiatives and expand measures against illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. Canada's objectives of promoting peace, resilience, and security in the region and addressing climate change and biodiversity loss are all intimately interconnected. The South China Sea hosts more than half of the world's fishing fleets, which are competing for increasingly scarce maritime resources, for which millions of people depend on for their livelihoods and food security throughout the region. The destruction of maritime habitats and the prevalence of illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, combined with complex security issues, are resulting in a situation where security, biodiversity loss, and climate challenges are overlapping to aggravate and amplify one another. So in conclusion, these significant geopolitical shifts and growing security challenges demand our collective action and our collective attention. The Indo-Pacific region, a nexus of global trade and strategic interests, is witnessing an unprecedented rise in security threats, ranging from traditional military tensions to non-traditional threats such as malicious cyber activity, transnational crime, and climate-induced disasters. The need for a comprehensive, cohesive, and proactive approach to these challenges has never been more urgent. It is imperative that we strengthen our ties, not only in defense, but also in economic resilience, technological innovation, and combating climate change, all of which will play a pivotal role in our shared security in the years to come. So thank you once again for the opportunity to speak today. I look forward to our further productive discussions. Merci beaucoup. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Ambassador David. Ambassador Mary Kay.
Good morning. Many thanks to the Philippine National Security Council, the Philippine Coast Guard, and Pacific Forum for organizing this important event. I'm truly honored to join Dindo and my colleagues here on this panel. The United States, the Philippines, and our like-minded partners share a common vision for a free, open, prosperous, connected, and resilient Indo-Pacific region. Standing up for the rules-based order in the South China Sea is an integral part of advancing this shared vision. This is why the United States has been unequivocal in supporting the historic 2016 Arbitral Tribunal decision, a milestone that affirmed the rights of the Philippines in the South China Sea as set out in the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. The Philippines and the United States are not alone. Many nations have expressed support for the 2016 ruling, which, as set out in the text of the convention, is final and legally binding on both the Philippines and the People's Republic of China. This is in part because of the implication of the ruling for the international community. By firmly rejecting the PRC's expansive maritime claims and affirming the Philippines' sovereign rights and jurisdiction in the South China Sea, the tribunal showed that international law is more than just a concept, and that it applies to all countries, regardless of their relative economic or military power. The great Philippine diplomat and statesman, Secretary of Foreign Affairs Albert del Rosario, characterized it best. International law, he said, allows the weak to challenge the powerful on an equal footing, confident in the conviction that principles trump power, that law triumphs over force, and that right prevails over might. The PRC has taken the opposite approach. Might makes right, giving preference to big nations over small ones, as if this concept should be taken as just a fact of life. Despite the indisputable fact, that the decision is final and legally binding on the parties to the dispute, the PRC continually rejects the tribunal's ruling in its rhetoric and actions that clearly violate international law. The world has witnessed the PRC's increasingly dangerous and escalatory actions over the past 18 months, as it unlawfully asserted a claim to territorial sovereignty over vast areas of ocean space, violently interfering with the Philippines' high seas freedom of navigation in the waters, especially near Second Thomas Shoal, known here, of course, as Ayungin. The PRC's target is not only the Philippines, but also the lawful sovereign rights and jurisdiction over natural resources of Vietnam, Indonesia, and other ASEAN coastal states. Use of water cannons, ramming, and other aggressive actions demonstrate a disregard for lives and livelihoods. This further demonstrates that the PRC is unwilling to abide by international law, which rejects the PRC's expansive maritime claims and supports the sovereign rights of the ASEAN South China Sea coastal states. Upholding international law in the South China Sea, in addition to being the right thing to do from a legal standpoint, supports global prosperity. The arbitral award affirmed that in vast maritime areas of the South China Sea, all nations enjoy freedom of navigation and overflight under international law, providing the legal foundation for trade, investment, and economic activity to thrive in the Indo-Pacific region. The South China Sea has some of the busiest shipping lanes in the world, through which approximately 1/3 of the global economy runs. Total annual trade flowing through the South China Sea is estimated to be nearly $4 trillion US. It is also home, as my colleagues have already mentioned, to abundant biodiversity and accounts for 12% of the global fish catch, generating $100 billion annually and supporting the livelihoods and critical dietary needs of millions of people. Zooming out, the Indo-Pacific region accounts for 60% of global GDP and 2/3 of global economic growth. Respect for freedom of the seas in the South China Sea is therefore essential for this robust economic activity to continue. I'm honored to sit with fellow representatives of countries who have made clear their support for the Philippines, the continued efficacy of international law, and for a free and open Indo-Pacific. We are far from alone. More and more nations from East Asia to Western Europe have spoken out to support the Philippines, uphold international law, and urge the PRC to cease escalatory and dangerous actions that impede the exercise of freedom of navigation and overflight, from which all nations benefit. We are proud to be among the chorus of nations that have consistently lent their voices to supporting the Philippines and calling out unlawful and escalatory behavior. The collective voice of the international community is loud and getting louder, and it speaks to our common resolve in support of international law and the standards that benefit us all. We saw this common resolve in action just this past September, when over 20 countries gathered on the margins of the UN General Assembly for a ministerial discussion on maritime safety and security in the Asia-Pacific region. This panel carries the subtitle, "The Stakes of the International Community." It is clear, the stakes and the consequences are high, but together, as friends, partners, and allies, with international law on our side, we are determined to protect the security and prosperity of the Indo-Pacific. Thank you. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Ambassador. Mary Kay. Ambassador Andres.
Yeah, thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. Dear Dindo, dear friends from the diplomatic community, dear co-panelists, dear academia and press present in this room. Let me start by congratulating the organizers for bringing together this important first Manila dialogue on the South China Sea. I think it's a wonderful initiative which must continue. Thanks also to the organizers for inviting me as a representative of a European country speaking in this room and trying to feed in a European perspective on the South China Sea. I see some colleagues from European neighbor countries here in the room. I have no mandate to talk on their behalf, but I'm quite confident that they will share some of the views and analysis I will try to present to you. What is at stake for Germany? What is at stake for Europe in the South China Sea? Countries more than 10,000 kilometers away from the South China Sea and from the Philippines. Why is peace and stability in the South China Sea of vital interest for us? As it has been mentioned earlier, and as you all know, Germany is one of the biggest trading nations in the world, and the EU is the biggest economic area in the world. Our economy depends heavily on shipping routes, on free and open access, and on secure shipping routes. And most of them, as has been mentioned already, pass through the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait. So one could argue our interest on peace and stability in the South China Sea is a purely economical one. But let me clarify, it is not. It is not a purely economical one. It is a very political interest. The Indo-Pacific is a key important region which will determine the future of the international order for the century to come. And that's why it is so important that we are engaged here. Let me refer to Russia's brutal war of aggression against Ukraine, violating international rules and using military violence against a peaceful country. I'm convinced that concerns all of us, because it continues to permanently challenge the international world order since 2.5 years now. It has huge repercussions on the international rules-based order and is about to change the geographical and geopolitical landscape on a global scale. Imagine North Korean soldiers in Ukraine, Iranian drones over Kiev, Germany completely withdrawing from the use of Russian gas and oil, a full-fledged hot war in Europe. I think I can pretend to say unthinkable for most of us in this room 3 years ago. And the world and countries also in this area are watching very carefully what is going on in Ukraine, how we all stand together to defend the rules-based international order or not, or whether we will allow that might makes right. The war in Ukraine has changed international politics, particularly from a European perspective. Peace in Europe, taken for granted for almost 6 decades, or at least since the end of the Cold War, is over. And that is not only, and that is why it's not only, but also because of Russia's war of aggression against the Ukraine, that Germany remains firm in our commitment to the Indo-Pacific and in defending the international rules-based order. We must remain firm in defending the international rules-based order in Europe, in the Indo-Pacific, in the South China Sea, and everywhere else in the world. We must stand together. We trust to have reliable partners in the Indo-Pacific sharing the same interest with us. And this encourages us to further engage in the region, also with other partners, some of them, many of them sitting in this panel, many of them sitting in the room, partners from Europe, from all over the world, to build on alliances for peace and security. This is also why my country, Germany, for the first time ever, participated in 2024 in the Balikatan exercise with an observer. And only recently, in mid-September of this year, we had a port call of 2 German Navy ships to Manila, the first visit of German Navy ships to the Philippines in more than 20 years. And there was much more that showed our commitment and our increasing commitment. The visit of my foreign minister in January, the visit of my defense minister in the Philippines in August, by the way, the first ever visit of a German defense minister to the Philippines in history. And of course, as a highlight this year, the visit of President Marcos Jr. to Germany in March this year, the year, by the way, in which we celebrate 70 years of diplomatic relations between our countries. Why do we do all this? The visits, the port calls, the observing the exercise, concluding defense agreements. All those elements are proof for Germany's commitment for international rules-based order and our interest to engage much more closely with our strategic partners in the Indo-Pacific, including in the field of security and defense. This is why Germany and the Philippines are envisaging to conclude a defense cooperation agreement, which will encompass, amongst others, closer cooperation in the field of armament and training. So here in Manila, a lot is at stake for Germany, and again, I suppose also for the European Union and European countries. Since I arrived in Manila more than 1 year ago, we saw a dramatic increase in incidents in the South China Sea, on water, and more recently also on air. These incidents have shown how fragile the situation is and how important it is to find lasting solutions for peace and stability, and how important it is to form a broad-based political alliance to defend the international rules-based order. Because all these incidents are a clear violation of the order. And it is important to put the violators of the order on the bank of accused for not complying with the rules. Let me thank our Filipino friends also for their tireless efforts to build that alliance. But it's not only enough to build political alliances. We also need capacity building. We need to strengthen up the security forces of the Philippines and of all countries in this region, and that's why Germany is supporting the Philippine Coast Guard, is supporting the Philippine Army with training, and is looking into a security agreement which we hope to conclude before the end of this year. Again, for Germany, it is crystal clear, and I have said that several times already, but it's always worth repeating. All legal issues concerning the status of the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines in the South China Sea have been finally resolved in 2016, and my co-panelists have referred to that already. The arbitral award is legally binding. Accepting this arbitral award and respecting UNCLOS by all parties concerned is essential for lasting peace and stability in the region. So, again, there is a lot at stake for Germany and European countries in the South China Sea. Defending the rules-based international order serves economic prosperity and political stability, as the two go hand in hand. And this is true not only in the South China Sea, but on a global scale. Without a free and open Indo-Pacific, no economic welfare and no economic growth in Germany, in Europe, and in the world. That is why we stand steadfast in defending the rules-based international order, here in the South China Sea and also in all other theaters. Without respect for the order, no peace and security in the South China Sea, no peace and stability in Ukraine, no peace and stability in the world. Thank you very much for your attention. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Ambassador Andreas. Can I do a follow-up, Ambassador? I just wanted to take off. Ambassador Andreas, I'll do, since you're the last to speak, I'll do that round again. The Philippines and Germany are working towards establishing a defense cooperation agreement. I just wanted to ask if there's an opportunity to share what will it entail to move this forward. Help us build this strong cooperation.
Yes. Thank you so much for the question. Yes, I referred to that already in my short presentation. Indeed, when our defense minister met the Secretary of Defense of the Philippines in August, the two exchanged a draft of a proposal which will entail indeed closer cooperation in almost all areas. It is about training of Philippine military personnel in Germany. It is about facilitating the delivery of armaments to the Philippines. It is about cooperation in cyber defense. It is about cooperation in sea surveillance in the South China Sea. But all this will be a framework agreement. So once concluded, I hope before the end of this year, it is currently under review with the Philippine authorities, then we will look into the details what to do. We have started staff talks on the level of defense ministries this year to concretize what we can do together, and once this agreement is concluded, we will then step by step fill in the different pillars that are part of this agreement. So this is all I can tell you for now.
Yes.
Sorry, Dindo, I will refer to it later when I'm entitled to share more of that. Thank you.
That is good enough, Ambassador. Thank you so much. I'll go to Ambassador Mary Kay. Ambassador Mary Kay, how can existing security partnerships, such as those like the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, be further expanded to protect the West Philippine Sea and enforce maritime laws and ensure a rules-based order?
Thank you. The Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, EDCA, enables the United States and the Philippines to really focus on interoperability and also to make advances in the force structure and in modernization of the Philippine military. So in that sense, a stronger alliance, stronger Philippines, makes a difference not only for what is going on in the West Philippine Sea, but for the entire comprehensive archipelagic defense concept that the Philippines is projecting. It is so important, especially for countries like the United States with a large landmass, to focus on the fact that in the Philippines territory there is more water than land. Yes. So it's a very challenging environment. But having these Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement sites, there are 9 of them currently. Now remember, those are Philippine bases to which the United States has access. It's the Philippines and the United States both that are investing in these locations to make sure that whether it's on modernizing the airstrip and enhancing it at Basa, or adding a fuel depot down in Mactan or other places, that our fighting forces, if called on to defend the Philippines or defend our interests in this region, that we have access to the capabilities that we would need. So we see EDCA as a very powerful opportunity for the U.S. and the Philippines to work together, but also EDCA is an important aspect so in the South China Sea, but also it extends beyond that to the entirety of the Philippines, including for humanitarian assistance. And we saw EDCA in action recently, where we took our supplies that were pre-positioned at Fort Magsaysay and were able to get those to areas in need. And again, because of the archipelagic nature of the Philippines and because it is in one of the most disaster-prone areas of the world, these EDCA sites are important for humanitarian assistance and relief as well.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador HK, I have this question for you. Australia's proven to be a reliable partner for the Philippines, especially in advocating the rules-based order. What can we, as a nation, Filipino people, look forward to from this strategic partnership in the coming years?
Hello? Yep, here it is. Thank you so much for that question, Dindo, and thank you for the recognition that Australia is a reliable partner. We really pride in that. And, the Philippines is a very important partner to us, and with our elevation to strategic partnership, what we have been doing is further deepening and broadening our cooperation on all fronts. And in particular, when it comes to military and security cooperation, of course, there has been further deepening of that cooperation in the maritime security space. And this is where we are working closely with agencies such as AFP and PCG to not only help them develop capabilities with appropriate equipment and capacity, but also to, as I said before, deepen their knowledge of international law, in particular UNCLOS, and application of that. In fact, I was mentioning about the law of the sea courses. We are doing more and more master's courses where we're actually looking at hypothetical cases and actually discussing in open forum with relevant agencies how the law could be applied to deal with very difficult and often situations that require fine judgment, how the law can actually help them guide through that. So that's, one big area where we're seeing more and more shift. Of course, Australia will continue to work with the Philippines to deal with counter-terrorism, but greater focus on maritime security. Another area where we're actually doing more is actually around environmental protection, especially in maritime space. So when President Marcos went to Australia and addressed our joint parliament, which was the first time ever by the Philippine president in March this year, one of the things that we achieved during his visit was this MOU on civil maritime security cooperation. And its real objective is not only in the security space to also work in the environmental protection space and protect the marine resources that are so important for all of us. And we also have just recently announced a 5-year development partnership plan, which was literally co-authored with the Philippines, to ensure that we're really focusing on the areas of priority for the Philippines and in the marine sector as well. So these are some of the examples of how we are really stepping up through strategic partnership, and there is going to be so much more to come in that space.
Thank you, Ambassador HK. Ambassador David, we know of the dark vessel detection system. You spoke about it in your speech, but I'd like to focus as we celebrate 75 years of diplomatic relations. How can our two countries, Philippines and Canada, expand cooperation, particularly in the area of defense and security?
Great. Thank you very much for the question. So I think, like many of our partners sitting on this panel today, Canada and the Philippines are very, very close to concluding a standing visiting forces agreement. I think once we have that in place, which we hope to have in the coming months, like many of our partners, we will deepen our collaboration to a greater degree. We are already enhanced over the last year. We signed a cooperative memorandum of understanding with the Armed Forces of the Philippines, the Department of National Defense. This year, once we have our visiting forces agreement, and we'll be able to participate that much more robustly. We're doing a lot of exchanges across the board. When we have a lot of those mechanisms, we're tempering and cueing our engagement here on the absorptive capacity of our Philippine counterparts. And so because this is, as you rightly suggested, the 75th anniversary of the establishment of Canada-Philippine diplomatic relations, we are very, very welcoming of developing that increasing strategic engagement. You know, as you mentioned, we have provided some enhanced maritime domain awareness capabilities to the Philippine Coast Guard, to a range of stakeholders within the government of the Philippines. I think, again, taking it to the next step will deepen that even further. Canada is blessed to have a lot of technological prowess in areas of you know, space-based surveillance, ISR, and others. So what we're very, very keen to do, however, is to work with every single one of our like-minded partners to calibrate our engagement with the government of the Philippines to make sure that we are not, frankly, duplicating efforts, but indeed that we're effectively sort of swimming all in the same direction and building capacity where capacity needs to be built first, to be more rigorous, more comprehensive, and again, really meet those immediate needs of our Philippine partners in a manner that they require and in a manner, frankly, that they can digest to protect and defend Philippine sovereignty.
Thank you, Ambassador David. For Ambassador Endo, we know Japan has consistently positioned and shared how important the West Philippine Sea is. I wanted to get your view on why is maritime cooperation between Japan and the Philippines important?
Thank you very much, Dindo. I think I might have touched upon that matter briefly in the previous remark, but as I mentioned, Japan is a country that is heavily dependent on the maritime transportation, and of course, economically, it's very important to maintain the freedom of navigation and the freedom of overflight in this very important area of South China Sea. But at the same time, as was mentioned by Andreas, I think it's not only the economic matter, but also various political security-related matters that makes this issue of South China Sea very important to Japan. And the issue concerning the South China Sea is directly linked to the peace and stability of this region. And that's why it is a legitimate concern of the international community. And Japan, as a country which is very closely located to the Philippines, we are working together in many areas. And it's not only in the maritime security cooperations, but also in many fields that Japan has been conducting so many cooperative activities and projects, including some of the transportation on the land, like subways or north-south commuter railways. But in addition to that, of course, we have been doing a lot of cooperations in the maritime sphere, particularly in the capacity enhancement development of the Philippines, because the law enforcement capability is really the foundation for maintaining the rule of law on the maritime sphere, and that is the background that the Japan Coast Guard has been working very, very closely with the Philippine Coast Guard for so many years. And as many of you, the colleagues around the table know, the Teresa Magmana that has been hit was also supported by the Japanese ODA. And as I mentioned, we have supported so far 10 44 meters class patrol vessels to the Philippines and 2 97-meter class patrol vessels. And we are also preparing for the additional 5 97-meter class vessels to the Philippines. And those are very important agenda for us to further deepen the collaborations between our two nations. And it's not only the vessels that matters, but also am I talking in the right? But the communication system also matters, and I hope that we can further deepen and expand our collaboration with the Philippine side.
Are there attempts to influence this panel by affecting our communications, our microphones? Before I open the floor for questions, allow me to ask my final question. As you know, as Australia, Canada, Germany, Japan, and the United States have been strong supporters of the Philippines Arbitral Award, and we are thankful as a nation for that. Several engagements in the defense and security space have also been conducted, including joint military exercises, such as the Balikatan exercises, joint patrols, like the multilateral maritime exercises. At this point, the support of these five countries is undeniable. But as China continues to be aggressive, coercive, how far, I would like to ask, try to be a little provocative, how far are your countries willing to go to support the Philippines and defend the rule of law in the West Philippine Sea and the rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific region? Open to anyone who would like to start. Maybe Ambassador HK, since you were there. You're in the middle.
Going first. I'm not sure about this. There's a disadvantage, I think, in this one. It's not first mover advantage at all. Very happy to. As I said in my remarks, the reason Australia is so passionate about this issue isn't just because we like the Philippines and isn't because, you know, we have a good relationship with the Philippines. It's absolutely fundamental to our future prosperity and security as well. And so given that, Australia's priority is to avoid conflict, is to prevent conflict before it begins. And what that means is that we will engage with the Philippines and our like-minded countries to do everything we can to deter the behaviors that could potentially lead to conflict, to avoid miscalculation and missteps that could potentially lead to conflict. Because let's face it, you know, any form of conflict, especially major power conflict, will be catastrophic for our region. So I think that really answers it. That is Australian government's priority. Let's prevent conflict at all costs.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador David?
Yes, I mean, I think like all of our partners sitting at the table today, we are fully vested in the defense of the rules-based international order. We are fully vested in the defense and the upholding of international law. We will expend what time, energy, resources are required in order to ensure that relationships are managed effectively, that disputes are settled amicably, without having to resort to coercion, to violence, etc. We will continue to highlight and showcase and illustrate to the world where we perceived amongst the like-minded community of nations abuses of international law. So, in short, I think we are prepared to do what is required. It is integral to our own national interests. I think, as Ambassador Yu had rightly suggested, this is a question that is not just about, the international, commons. It is very much at the forefront of Canadian national interests. We too are a middle power. We too are blessed to be a prosperous nation. But in order for us to continue to be prosperous, we have to be able to trade and engage with the world. And there needs to be predictability, stability, and transparency in order for our businesses, our industries to be able to prosper. And again, we will expend, I believe, what is absolutely required in order to uphold our commitments to our partners and our allies.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador Andreas?
Yes, thank you very much. I mean, as colleagues have said, of course, we all favor diplomatic, peaceful relations, and our main goal is to avoid a real hot war and conflict in the region. And what will we do? We will continue to do what we've done already, politically support the Philippines, politically support alliances that build on defending the international rules-based order, but also capacity building, what we are already doing and what we might do more in the future. Capacity building when it comes to enabling the Philippine forces, the Philippine Coast Guard, in defending and exercising really the sovereignty of the Philippines over their exclusive economic zone. But there's another aspect also, which is the legal aspect. Political alliance is one thing, capacity building is a second thing. A third thing might also legally to do everything to uphold the international rules-based order. And you might recall that years ago already countries have have via verbal note clearly stated their legal status on the South China Sea, and China is again and again putting that into question and challenging that. So we might consider to again also legally very clearly make clear our standpoint. I said the arbitral award is binding, but there is more that can be done on the legal front, and I can share here that my capital is currently thinking about that to support the Philippines and the stability in the region, also with another legal step at New York at the level of the United Nations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Andreas. Ambassador Enda?
Just very briefly. Considering the location of our country, of course, the peace and stability in this region is of critical importance, and so that we are very much willing and prepared to work for that goal. And at the same time, as everybody has been mentioning, that it is important to prevent any mishappenings from happening. And so I think we should be working very hard in a comprehensive way. Of course, working with allies and like-minded partners is of critical importance, and at the same time, as has been emphasized, capacity building, raising the awareness, engagement, all those elements are very critical in order to work toward that goal, and we are very much willing to work together with the Philippine side.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador Mary Kay?
Well, what they said, I think there's quite a significant consensus here in the panel that might does not make right. When I was in General Santos recently, I referred to the 10-dash line as a cartoon. It is a complete fiction. The fact that, as Dindo mentioned, that the PRC continues to press its claims does not mean that we should back away from defending international law and promoting the Philippines' rights in their own jurisdiction. So we are, in the United States, we have a mutual defense treaty, we have a stake in international law, we have a community of nations, in addition to our lattice work of alliances here in this region. There's a community of nations, and we've already, in our opening statements, I think each and every one of us talked about the significance of the South China Sea region. So when you look at, deterrence, provocation, that's a fine line. The PRC will always say it is our side that's being provocative, but that doesn't mean that we simply retreat. We have to act in order to deter their aggressive behavior in the region. So escalation, appeasement, deterrence, provocation, there's no specific formula. We have to assess at every stage what we can do together to make sure that we stay on the right track so that there is no miscalculation. And essential to ensuring there is no miscalculation is good diplomacy, good communication, so that we continue to engage in international fora and track 1.5 dialogues like this one. We make very clear what our expectations are and what our policies are, and that we also engage with our diplomatic counterparts and also in the mill channels with the PRC, so that there can be no doubt in their mind about our resolve.
Thank you, Ambassador Merke. I'll open the floor for questions. I see Dr. De Castro.
I have 3 questions addressed to Professor Endo, to Ambassador Mary Kay Carlson, and to Ambassador Andres. Let me start with my question, very short. Ambassador Endo, can you give us a status now of the reciprocal access agreement? To Ambassador Mary Kay, ma'am, can you basically project what will be the possible change in policy regarding U.S. policy on the South China Sea and, of course, the alliance in the light of the change in administration in Washington, D.C.? And Ambassador Andreas, we all know that the developments in the Russia-Ukraine war is not going to the favor of Ukraine. And, of course, given the possible change in U.S. foreign policy, U.S. policy vis-a-vis Ukraine, after, of course, you have a change in administration, can any adverse developments in Ukraine affect Germany's outward orientation now, given the fact that Germany has an Indo-Pacific strategy, and, of course, you have your growing security engagement with the Philippines? Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for the question related to the Japan-Philippine RAA. It has been signed on the occasion of the 2+2 meeting in early July, and it is to be taken into effect quite soon. And Japan-Philippine RAA is designed to facilitate mutual visits of Japan's self-defense forces and armed forces of the Philippines through setting procedures on their visits as well as their legal status. And it will further encourage cooperative activities such as joint exercises and humanitarian assistance, thereby enhance their interoperability. Thank you.
I think it's important to note that in the United States we have one administration at a time, one president at a time, and we are still in the Biden administration. I don't want to get out ahead of what the Trump administration will do, but I think it's very clear that there is very strong bipartisan support for the U.S.-Philippine alliance. And we look at, for example, 4.5 million Filipino Americans in the United States, many of whom voted in our election. And we have to presume that that population mirrored the general vote count with a good 50% plus in favor of a Trump administration. So the people of the United States, our voters have spoken, and our voters, just like you do here in the Philippines, we hold our governments accountable. So the voters will be expecting the people that they've elected to act in accordance with the will of the people. So we expect, because the strong people-to-people ties are so vibrant, because our economic interests are clear, because we share national security interests, we expect that the Trump administration will continue to put a great deal of emphasis on the importance of the U.S.-Philippine alliance. I'm very confident in that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. I also would like to follow what Mary Kay just said. We still work with the Biden administration. There is an administration in place which we are working with, and I would not like to speculate here on what's going to happen starting in January next year. But one thing, of course, is also clear. Resources are limited. There are probably growing needs for defense expenditures. There are growing needs because we have growing theaters and more dangerous theaters in the world, and resources are limited. So we have to strike a difficult balance what to do and how to prioritize. I think this is something every government has to do on a permanent basis. And as you might know, we have an additional problem in Germany. Our government has just broken down, so we have anyway to see where we are going to, because one of our coalition partners has left the coalition. So in Germany we might have new elections at the latest in spring next year, and then we will have to redefine a lot of our politics. So speculating now about Ukraine and the South China Sea and prioritizing, I would deny to do that at that point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ko? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, many thanks to Your Excellencies for your sharing of your candid views. I just want to build a little bit on what has been discussed earlier regarding how far you can go. And allow me to be a little bit more provocative here. And let's say in the face of continued Chinese coercive actions, how will you deal with the narrative that, first of all, these activities are not having any effect? And secondly, that all these activities were regarded as destabilizing peace and stability in the South China Sea. So how will you deal with that narrative? Thank you so much.
Ambassador David?
Sure, I will take a first attempt to address that question. So I think, first off, I think it's very important to highlight that the government of the Philippines' transparency policy has been remarkably successful. It has focused international attention on the South China Sea at a period that is, incomparable to what has transpired previously. So I think, we will continue to dedicate the resources required to ensure that the sanctity of the upholding of international law in the South China Sea remains at the top of the international agenda. And I know we were asked at today's 1.5 event, not to use, too much academic language. But look, the crass reality is we are living in an era of polycrisis. There are many, many things, drawing the attention of the international community around the world right now. But I can assure you that the government of Canada will not turn away from its commitments and its partnerships. Canada does not abandon its allies and its partners in their time of need. We rise to the occasion. We have demonstrated throughout our history our ability to march in lockstep with our partners, with our allies, in the defense of freedom and liberty and all of the issues that we cherish and hold dear to our hearts. So I'm very confident that, and this would be a politically agnostic thing in Canada, that regardless of which government were to, hold power in Canada, our people would expect us to rise to the occasion and do what is right, to defend the rules-based international order and all of those systems that we put in place with all of our like-minded partners, indeed with the entire global community, to which we have all subscribed of our own volition. Nobody was coerced to adopt and adapt these international protocols and norms. And of course, it is at the very, very heart of our national interest. So that's a very long-winded way of saying that we will do what is required in order to maintain focus and attention on this very, very vital, dare I say, strategic area of the world.
Could I just add also that it would be naive to expect instant gratification in terms of immediately the positive results of our actions. We get criticized in the West a lot of times, being part of the New World, as thinking in terms of administrations, whereas millennial cultures think in terms of dynasties. We also need to take a longer-term view. The fact that the PRC continues in its aggressive behavior is no reason for us to somehow back away and say, well, it hasn't worked, so therefore we give up. So it's a matter of continuing to stay lashed up as the international community, having a common view of the importance of international law and continuing to press our case. And over time, even if we don't see results today, tomorrow, this year, over time, because we are right, right will prevail over might in the end. I'm very confident of that. And you have the U.S. commitment to that as well.
Ambassador H.
Thank you. And with regard to your direct question, I would actually say that activities are not having effect is just false. I remember Australia was one of the first countries to support the Philippines when 2016 arbitral award was delivered. Look at what the situation is now. We have more countries all around the world, right through to Europe, Germany, many countries from there, expressing strong support for the Philippines and the fact that the Arbitral Award 2016 is binding and final on both members. And in terms of this narrative that activities are having a destabilizing effect, our activities, this is where, once again, we have to call out the incorrectness of that narrative. We have to go back to how the international law applies and say, so who is destabilizing the situation, right? So I think we have to actually put the facts on the table, show the world that many more are actually promoting the international law, advocating for UNCLOS and adherence to it, and that who is destabilizing, we have to call that out as well.
Ambassador Endo.
Again, just very briefly, I would like to echo with Ambassador Mary Kay that I think we really have to think in the long term and looking at the past in the long term and looking into the future in the longer term. And since I joined the Japanese Foreign Service for more than 30 years, I think we've been seeing steady increase of the provocative activities around this region, and we really have to address this matter in a very serious way. And at the same time, as has been mentioned, we have to deter the real clash, and that's a very subtle balance, but we should be working hard toward that.
Ambassador Andres.
Thank you very much. I also tend to, to disagree with the original idea saying that everything is getting worse and all these policies has no effects. I don't know where we would be without the political support that has been gathered for the Philippines over the last years, but I guess it would be definitely worse. So yes, we are not there where we would like to be. We have to continue to pressure, we have to continue to build up political support, but I'm sure this is nevertheless the way to go. So pointing finger at, let's face it, at the country which is doing aggressive incidents, provoking aggressive incidents in the South China Sea has to continue. And China is very susceptible, I think, for the reaction of the international community. And the more and more countries you have who are clearly stating that China is the aggressor, that China is the one that needs to be blamed for not respecting the arbitral award and for provoking incidents on a very frequent basis, that also hurts China. So I think this continues to be the way to go. And yes, you might argue that we have not been completely successful. I think everybody agrees in light of the incidents we are seeing. But I continue to think that this is the right way to go. The transparency initiative of the Philippine government was and remains to be a successful step, and we are very grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'll take questions from, I hope I can read them right, Mr. Inkiriwang, then Ms. Bitran. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to address my question to Ambassador David. As you mentioned, your country's commitment to peace and stability in the region. I'm also aware that Canada has become one of the dialogue partners of ASEAN. What do you think of the benefit of this status in helping your country achieve a greater contribution to their commitment? because by being a dialogue partner, you have access to ADMM Plus and exercises, including the military. And the second point that I would like to make, probably would like to hear the response from Ambassador Andreas as well, because some other European and NATO countries which have demonstrated their willingness to contribute to region, but they don't have similar access like Canada as a dialogue partners. What do you think of this kind of, and the last one for Ambassador Endo, the publication of 2022 National Security Strategy, how will it affect your greater contribution to deal with the issue in South China Sea? Thank you.
So just to go back to your question, I didn't hear you all that well. Could you please repeat the question?
I would like to know your perspective with Canada's status being a dialogue partner of ASEAN, because being a dialogue partner, along with Russia, China, United States, you have the access to participate in ADMM Plus and other, military and defense-related interactions. How significant does this status allow you to contribute greater in achieving your commitment? Thank you.
So, look, Canada has a strategic partnership with ASEAN. We're very proud of that, a dialogue partner. So Canada is committed to engagement. Canada will leverage every single lever of opportunity to posit our position, to reiterate our stance and our commitment to the rules-based international order and to the upholding of international law here. So I think Canada is committed to the notion of ASEAN centrality. We want to make sure that the vested community, particularly those that are most poignantly affected in the region of the South China Sea, have those opportunities to dialogue and exchange. So we will absolutely leverage our augmented presence there to have these discussions with everyone. The role of a diplomat is to indeed dialogue, it's to engage. And so we will remain fully committed to leveraging all of those opportunities to be able to do so. Thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I also have to come back to your question. If I understood correctly, you were talking about access of other European partners to the Philippine government or to the South China Sea, to ASEAN. Could you please elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, being slightly different with Canada, you're not part of the dialogue partner of ASEAN. To what extent this situation would hamper or probably provide opportunity or... Thank you.
No, exactly. We are not a partner and not a formal partner of ASEAN, but for example, Germany is trying to become a member of ADMM Plus. So we would like, as my colleague David said, dialogue and consultation is the way to go. We are striving to get observer status at ADMM Plus in order to be more involved in this theater, to be more involved in these discussions. Because we think this is the way to go. I can here only speak for Germany because we are striving to be a member of ADMM Plus. We are hopeful that we will get this status next year. That will allow us then to even more engage with ASEAN on issues of security and defense. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question related to the national security strategy in 2022, I believe. It's also a very comprehensive strategy that navigates the Japanese foreign policy, security policy, and all those related policies. So it touches upon various aspects, including the strengthened diplomatic efforts with all those partners in the region. But in that strategy, we also referred to the seriousness of the current situation in the South China Sea, and as mentioned, we are very much committed to work for that agenda. And just one specific example that we've been working is that in accordance with that national security strategy, Japanese government has started the scheme called Official Security Assistance. And the Philippines is actually the first recipient country of that support of official security assistance. And we've been supporting the Philippines armed forces with the coastal radar systems through that scheme, and that is also one important agenda related to this national security strategy.
Mr.
Thank you, Chair. So the ambassador from India is not here, but I would like to ask the ambassador from the US, Japan, and Australia, if you could give us some update on your country contribution to the Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness. Thanks.
Ambassador Mary Kay.
I'll have to get back to you on that. Honestly, I didn't come with specifics for today.
So the initiative by the Quad members, the Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness. So it was launched in 2022, but we don't have any updates on the implementation.
Thank you for that question. Well, the Quad, as a formation, is a diplomatic partnership designed to coordinate our activities in the Indo-Pacific. And as part of that, Quad has made a huge effort to engage Southeast Asian countries. The Indo-Pacific Partnership that you mentioned, I have to say, it doesn't ring a bell, so I'm going to have to chase that up and find out exactly what the scope of that was. But the Quad, as we know it, is really a diplomatic partnership designed to coordinate our work better, to really further promote the rule of law, and to ensure that Southeast Asian countries, including the Philippines and others, have real choices available to them, whether it's in environmental work, climate change, economic relationships, and even health. So these are practical things that the Quad is actually advancing through that fora to engage the region on very important issues.
Yes, so I'm referring to the initiative that make use of satellite radio frequencies to enhance maritime domain awareness.
There's actually a lot of work underway under the Quad, and I can certainly provide, we can certainly collectively provide updates on those different streams of work. But absolutely, what the Quad is doing is looking at our relative strengths, looking at how we can bring it all together to actually make coordination easier and cooperation easier with countries in Southeast Asia and in the Indo-Pacific more broadly.
Thank you very much. I also have to check with the details of the current status, but as you mentioned, maritime domain awareness is really one of the flagship projects for the Quad corporations, and of course, it's not necessarily intended to target the Philippines' capacity building, but it's more broadly planned and designed. But I think our colleagues working on the maritime domain awareness support to the region is working very hard. I used to work on this matter, but I should be updated. Yeah.
Thank you, Producer. Maybe we can have Mr. Liu, then Mr. Furuya.
Yeah.
Mr. Liu first.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'm Liu Xiaobo from the Grandview Institution in Beijing, China. And my question to the distinguished ambassador of the United States of America, and would you like to share your personal view about the reason why the United States of America didn't rectify the UNCLOS right now? Yeah.
The UN Conference on the Law of the Sea is now established international law. So the United States fully adheres to international legal principles enshrined therein, and I'll leave it at that.
Mr. Faria.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Excellencies, for your presentation. As I have heard that many of you are talking about capacity building, particularly seminars on Rob 3 or other exercises. And I was wondering, is there any plan to collaborate each other so that you can double the effort for the peace and stability in this region? As far as I understand, that Japan has already taken such initiative with the United States to provide capacity building programs to Philippine Coast Guard. Is there any such similar plans for other nations? That's my question. Thank you very much.
Are you happy for me to answer? That's easy. We're already doing so. You'll be pleased to hear all the like-minded countries who have presence in the Philippines. We actively work together to collaborate, to ensure that we are complementing each other's efforts in that regard, along with the Philippines.
And if I could just add further to that, what I mentioned a bit earlier is what you will see now is even greater collaboration, again, to make sure that when we're engaging around the area of capacity building writ large, that we will do so in a manner where we are not duplicating efforts, but that we are fully aligned and ensuring that each of us plays to our respective strengths, our respective capacities, so that we're really generating the full force of effect of our engagement with our Filipino partners.
And just on a practical basis, this occurs at all levels, including at the working level here in Manila, where we have our counterparts from, for example, from the Coast Guard. All of our missions here have programs with the Coast Guard. So we get together with our Philippine Coast Guard colleagues and working level contacts at each embassy to basically, look at making sure that we're not duplicating efforts and making sure that we are all, to use a nautical term, rowing in the same direction, if you will. So we see that not just at the UN level, where we just in September had the ministerial conference, which attracted over 20 ministerial level individuals to talk about the Indo-Pacific and safety and security, where the Philippines figured prominently, but at the working level as well. There's very good cooperation, in particular for capacity building for the Philippines, but also on our common interests across the Indo-Pacific.
Nothing much to add, but I think we've been working very hard on various settings, and in that regard, I would also like to pay respect to the tireless efforts on the side of the Philippine Coast Guard, so that they can also find the complementarity between various supports from various actors in this room.
Commodore J. Yeah.
Thank you, Sir Dindo. As we know, the Philippines is the only country in ASEAN that has consistently criticized China's aggressive and unlawful actions. This is understandable given that the People's Republic of China is the largest trading partner in the region. What are the efforts of your governments making ASEAN be encouraged to stand in favor of the rule of law against China's aggression? They say that China can punish them more credibly than the West can defend them if push comes to shove. Thank you.
Who would like to go? Ambassador HK.
I just wonder whether I can provide an update on the Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness. So there has been a lot of progress made, but I think the lady's gone, so maybe I will give it to her directly.
Ambassador David.
So thank you very much for the question, and I think it's very clear that Canada continues to engage with each and every one of our ASEAN partners to stress the primacy of the adherence to international law, We provide the same level of messaging as we do to all of our partners in the region, that Canada stands in unison with those countries that are feeling a little bit more of economic pressure, economic coercion, and these types of things, and that we will work together in a sort of unified manner with our partners to make sure that they feel supported and leveraging their own voices and leveraging their own independent opinion on challenges that are taking place in the South China Sea. We've started to see, I think, many other partners in the region starting to leverage their voice in a much more public fora than would have been done just a short while ago. Again, my personal opinion and observation is that is largely attributable to the success of the government of the Philippines Transparency Initiative by speaking out where there are aberrations and where there are activities taking place that are violating international law. And so again, we are engaging, we continue to engage, we continue to coordinate with all of our partners both in ASEAN and without to deliver very consistent messaging so that again, as that we are all on the same page in terms of the adherence and the upholding of international law, including providing offers of support and assistance to help bolster legal cases, legal arguments, economic support, and engagement as well. So frankly, we're leveraging every sort of arrow in our quiver to be able to engage robustly with all of our partners throughout ASEAN.
Ambassador HK.
And now I can answer this question. Sorry about that. I got distracted with the other information that came through. When it comes to involvement with ASEAN, with Australia, we always emphasize that this is actually about each country's national interest. And what the ASEAN countries need to do is ensure you are exercising your agency clearly and strongly in order to advance your own national interests. And to help with that, what Australia is doing is ensuring our partnership with ASEAN is strong. And in fact, during our last ASEAN-Australia summit, our foreign minister announced $64 million project so that Australia can enhance our Southeast Asia maritime partnerships. So we want to help the ASEANs understand, just like Australia in the region, that this is really about protecting our national interests, advancing our interests through exercising our own agency. And we also want to help the ASEANs by actually implementing practical, useful initiatives in partnership with ASEAN.
Ambassador, any other? No. Robin, you're seated, Dr.
Good afternoon, Your Excellencies. Thank you very much for your remarks. I'm Robin Garcia. I'm connected with the University of Pennsylvania. I also lead a firm called WR Advisory Group. You focused your remarks on what you've been doing to help the Philippines and other ASEAN countries respond to China. Maybe I'm going to move the discussion to what the Philippines should be doing more in order to respond to China. You've mentioned the success of the Transparency Initiative. You've also just actually mentioned the idea of asserting agency. But are there other things we should be doing? Legislation, for instance, some initiatives that you've launched, or you've suggested the President to do. So more on that line, what we should be doing as a country or as a region. Thank you.
Any ambassador? Ambassador HK, then... oh, Ambassador Enda?
Well, I will just say that in terms of diplomacy, in our view, there's always more that we can do in terms of communication. When you think about diplomacy and what that means, it's really communicating your shared interests, working toward common goals, building relationships of trust. And so for the Philippines, as it is for all of our diplomatic, whether it's the State Department or the Department of Foreign Affairs or Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it's one of capacity. There are so many crises, we've heard about them mentioned today. It's just very important that we continue to work together to amplify each other's voices. when we go and we talk about issues that are occurring in the South China Sea, aggressive activities that we are calling out, challenges that we're facing, that especially in the Philippines exclusive economic zone, the best voice for that is the Philippines. And we are better amplifying that voice. Now, we all face constraints in terms of capacity, but what we would like to continue to do with our Philippine partners is to make sure their voice is front and center and is heard first, and that we are then able to amplify that. So that would be, from my perspective, more, better communication. But there are only so many hours in the day, there are only so many diplomats assigned, so that is not a criticism, it's just what we could all collectively, I think, do better together.
Thank you. And the first.
First, I wanted to go back to the previous question. What we are doing with the ASEAN before responding to what the Philippines should be doing in ASEAN. But first, we've also, of course, been very much deeply engaged with so many ASEAN friends, and both in the private sphere and also in the public sphere. And I think that's very important to have a very multi-layered communications with various partners in the region at the leaders level, foreign ministry, or we also have a very close connections between various coast guards. And as I mentioned in the previous remark, we've also been supporting so many countries for their capacity buildings, and that's, I think, a very important foundation. And at the same time, I see growing number of Track 2 1.5 dialogues with our various ASEAN partners, which I think is also an important step forward. And with regard to what the Philippines should see your engagement with other ASEAN partners, of course, it's up to the Philippine government, but I personally tend to think that, again, back to the basics, it is very important to see this matter in a longer term perspectives. And each nation has its own positions over this matter, but it is very important to have a longer term perspectives to keep engagement, keep communications in various ways at multi-layered way, so that we can further strengthen the collective positions in the future.
Ambassador HK, then Ambassador David.
Thank you. This may sound like things that I think the Philippines should do more, they're already doing. And it's going to sound like that because the Philippines is already doing it. One thing that Australia really focused on years back was around making sure the Philippines had unilateral law that aligned with international law. And of course, this morning, the President has actually signed the Maritime Zone Bill and the Archipelagic Sea Lanes Bill. These are really, really important laws. And Australia is really proud that we were able to support the Philippines through Waypoint to get these two bills developed and now passed. The second thing the Philippines can do more of is to actually engage with more countries to form more partnerships. And once again, they're already doing that. We are seeing great amount of interest from European countries even, well beyond those that are here. We've got many countries now wanting to reach out to the Philippines to partner in this very, very important endeavor. And this is something that the Philippines has to continue to do. I also think there is room for the Philippines to be the teacher based on the experiences that I have in tackling this very challenging the issue around the West Philippine Sea. And to that extent, I've already heard people like Secretary Teodoro talking about the importance of the Philippines sharing your experience with countries in the Pacific Island nations, for example. So I think there is really a big role that the Philippines can play in reaching out to others and talking about their experience more broadly. And then finally, of course, ensuring that you are really stepping up, the Philippines is stepping up with its own military and security capabilities. And once again, very pleased to say, the Philippines is already doing it. You just have to look at the ambition of Horizon project just to see how ambitious they are about achieving that.
Ambassador David?
Yeah, just to reiterate and echo a little bit of what my colleagues have already said, I think a lot of the focus needs to be, while general capacity is being built across the board, amplifying, solidifying the ability of the government of the Philippines, all of the various stakeholders, agencies, and departments to focus time and energy on this issue. One area where we continue to engage is around the area of strategic communications. Right? So sort of managing, owning the narrative, focusing on the primacy of international law. Some of our other close like-minded partners, the government of the United Kingdom and others, are working very closely with the government of the Philippines on projects targeting and specifying specifically, again, on strategic communications. What we really need to be careful and mindful of, and many of my colleagues have mentioned this morning, is the strategic context in which all of this is taking place. And there are many partners in the region who have greater capacity to practice strategic patience, right? It's been a theme that's been very consistent. And of course, in a lot of our countries, we're dealing with these issues tactically, transactionally. But we cannot take our eye off of the focus on the strategic primacy of what we are fundamentally defending here, which is international order and international law. And so we can get caught up in the day-to-day, all of the difficulties, all of the incidents that are taking place, but we cannot take our eye off the prize of maintaining that strategic focus. So further efforts, capacity building around strategic communications, making sure that, as my colleagues have suggested, that the experience that the Philippines is undergoing, they're enduring, is leveraged as an example and as an illustration to the global community, like my colleague from Germany suggested, about what's transpiring in Ukraine. Again, as an illustration, a very poignant and compelling illustration to the international community about the need, the requirement to hold up the sanctity of international law.
Ambassador Andres?
Yeah, just quickly to echo. I mean, what can be more? What can be done more in order to solidify this alliance, this political alliance? My observation. I'm not here to give any recommendation, but my observation would be the Philippines have built up a lot of diplomatic capital over the last 2 or 3 years. This is visible in all the visits we've seen, in all the contacts that the Philippine president has taken. The Philippine DFA was able to entertain delegations coming in from all over the world. So building a political alliance on a high level, I think the Philippines have been very successful over the last 2 years, and that will continue, and that will bear its fruit. It will bear its fruit when it comes to defending the international rules-based order. You can always argue that there might be more to be done on the ASEAN level here in the region. Yes, the efforts might be, the success might be limited so far, but I think also the presidency of ASEAN in 2026 for the Philippines is a very good chance to build also on that. So I'm very optimistic that this diplomatic capital, which the Philippines have built up over the last 2 years, will bear its fruit, and we will all, in particular the Philippines, of course, will benefit from it in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, ambassadors. And in that, I think we need to end this session. Lunch is quite near, but something that we need to remind ourselves is that collaboration with like-minded partners is essential for effectively responding to aggressive maneuvers that challenge our territorial integrity, our maritime rights in the Philippines, and ultimately the path forward hinges on our collective resolve to strengthen this partnership and foster an environment where diplomacy, dialogue take precedence over confrontation. Again, thank you, dear ambassadors, for joining us here.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. That was a special roundtable with our ambassadors. And of course, thank you to our panel chair. We would like to request our ambassadors and our panel chair to also take this photo opportunity. Our cameramen are already on standby. Before we proceed with our lunch, of course. I know everyone's already hungry. How about another big round of